Hi.
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, so let's talk about your two other papers. And let me open up one of them here. And let's talk about, I guess we can talk about this one. And that is your American history paper.
Yes.
And so you can see that. I think you can see that. See that, make sure you can see that. Okay, I think that's it. And okay, so U.S. foreign policy. Okay, so an overexpansion of U.S. foreign policy does. Well, let me save this again just in case I make some more changes to it. So we go here and make a little 2 in front of it. I suggest do not use contractions in scholarly writing because they are a form of informal speech. So we don't use those when we're writing an academic work. It's just something we write when we're talking about conversation. So does not lead to. Okay, so also, you know, one of my tasks is to help you polish your already wonderful English skills to make them even, you know, continue to make them even better. And so, you know, when I make suggestions to how you might want to clarify or refine your writing, I make typically 2 suggestions because I want the student to think about what they prefer and how they want to say it, because rather than me tell you how you should say it, because if you have to think about it and you choose what you like, then you're more likely to learn. So I always offer like 2 suggestions, right? So an overexpansion of U.S. foreign policy does not lead to or towards, which either one's okay. Either one's acceptable. Which ones do you prefer? To or towards? Which do you want? Either one. And you can change your mind. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to ask you, which ones do you prefer? To or towards?
Two.
Okay.
Is better, I think.
All right. So I will cross that out and I'll send this to you and you can clean it up and whatever. You can do what you want. So either one's okay, right? The rise of Donald Trump to election as the United States president. Not only the president makes decisions about or makes foreign policy. So which do you prefer?
It's quite difficult, but I will just make decisions.
Okay, so I will let you again. I will just let you make decisions about. Okay, I will then let you clean that up because if you clean that up, then you again are going to study it somewhat. There are a lot of factors in the foreign policy process in the United States. It is very complicated, entangled environmentally and structurally. A lot of organizations and advisors in the U.S. cooperate with or among. Which do you prefer?
Among.
Okay, I'll let you fix that up there. And
but should I change after the meeting?
You can change. No, it doesn't change the meaning. They're very close. Very close. Okay. So you're right. It is a pronoun. So I says, what does it refer to? It. You mean the claim or the statement is not valid? The immoderate expansion of foreign policy led to the election of Donald Trump as the United States president. So, which do you prefer, the claim or the statement? Either one. You can change.
I think the very last before sentence.
Oh, so the statement. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So again, I'll just cross those out and let you fix that up when I send it back to you. This draft back to you. Okay, so let me remind myself what I wrote here, so I'll make sure we cover it. Okay, this is, of course, a very important point. In order to be able to receive a good grade, the final draft of the paper must use and cite specific information from at least three different chapters, right? 3 different chapters from chapters 1 through 6 of the book, of the textbook. I see information used inside from only 2 chapters here in this draft. Okay, so you need to find information from another chapter. The idea is if you have to put different pieces of information together in different ways, you have 3 pieces of information, you have to put them together, and you make something new, or you develop a new idea or insight, right? So that's why I want, and also it's another way by which to get people to do their homework, to try to study the reading, and also to encourage people to further develop their communication writing skills. So that's why I'm really asking that you use and cite information from at least 3 different chapters. And I point out, I don't know if you've done this, but you can use the index in the back of the book to find specific information. So I think you talk about hegemony. Yeah, you talk about hegemony. Okay, so you can use, let me see if I can find the book here. I think here it is. So this is the textbook, right? This is our textbook. And then you can go to the back and you can see this. This is called the index, right? And I don't know, maybe you already know this. You can look up hegemony and you can see hegemony is here. It says it's on page, it's too small to show here, but it's on page, hegemon is on page 5 and 6. That's chapter 1. Hegemony is on page 17, 252, and 273. So that's one way by which you try to find some information using the words you like to use to find more information. But make sure it's from chapters 1 through 6 of the book. So chapter 1 through 6, I mean, I think 1 through 6 means, well, chapter 6 ends at page, this is after chapter, these are later chapters. So page 17 is of course is in chapter 2. Okay, page 17 is on chapter 2. And use information, I think there's from chapter 1 is page 6, and page 53 is chapter 3. So this is chapter 3, this is chapter 1. So if you use something from page 17, that's chapter 2. So there you go. Right? You can find some information on page 17 about hegemony. So you go to page 17 and you look up, what does it say about hegemony? And yeah, so the demise of the Spanish Empire in Latin America, which led to the liberation of its colonies, paved the way for U.S. regional hegemony. They're talking about U.S. becoming the dominant actor in North and South America after the Spanish lost their empire 200 years ago in South America. And you can do the same thing for the U.S. history exam that you submitted, the U.S. history paper for Howard Zinn. You can use the index in that book to look up words, to find information to use on ideas and comments that Daniel Flynn discusses. So we'll talk about that paper a little bit later, but when Daniel Flynn talks about slavery, well, then what does Howard Zinn say about slavery in chapters 1 through 12 of the in other words, the first half of his book? And you can use the index, look up slavery in the back of the book, SLAVER, and you'll find all these page numbers where different aspects and ideas about slavery are mentioned on those specific page numbers. So you can find information easily that way. Okay, so let's go back here. So first, a direction of U.S. foreign policy was set in 1940s by President Truman. President Truman concluded that the nation is intimately tied to global stability, political reform, and economic growth. Yeah, typically, the citation comes before the period at the end of the sentence, and you don't need to put all that in. You can just put like that. Okay, the U.S. had made a profit in a market-friendly global trading system that the U.S. led. For example, many conglomerates, investors, and banks benefited from these policies. Do these foreign policies? Yeah, I say you don't need to say I thought. You don't need to use first person, I, me, mine, my, we, us, ours in scholarly writing, because it reminds the reader that they're reading an opinion. And in scholarly academic writing, we don't want to read opinions. We want to read claims that you think you claim are true. You make a truth statement, a truth claim, and then you prove it. So you just say that the US had grown into a strong hegemony while the Soviet Union collapsed. While the Soviet Union focused a lot on strengthening its military power, the United States actively tried to expand its power not only politically but also economically. Well, if the U.S. is so benefited so much from hegemony, why did and it's benefited economically so much from this global domination that the United States created after World War II? Why is there this hostility to by Donald Trump and those people that supported Donald Trump against U.S.-led global order? Because you highlight how it's so beneficial to the US, but is it beneficial to everybody in the US? Or just people like you and me? I mean, you speak English, you're going to graduate from Catholic University of Korea, you are going to get a good job, you're going to use your English language, maybe to travel and to do business and to do work and make a good income. Yeah, globalization, you're doing well, right? But there are a lot of people, even here in Korea, who for whatever reason, they are not trained and skilled and equipped to exploit the opportunities of globalization, this world order that the United States created to encourage globalization. And they feel, including a lot of people, and let's focus on the United States, that somehow the United States is becoming more and more diverse, with more and more different kinds of people living there in the United States. I mean, something like, was it something like the, I can't remember, something like 13% of Americans who live in the United States were not born there. I think it's the highest. Well, I mean, there's a lot of, so there's more and more people coming to the United States who don't look like the traditional American. When I say American, people think white, maybe light colored hair, blue eyes, a Northern European. They don't think about necessarily somebody who looks like they're from Asia or Africa. And there's more and more of those people coming into the United States because of the system that the Americans created after World War II. That the Americans created, why did the Americans create that system? Kang Tong-un, why did the US create that system?
Because there are many ethnic groups.
Well, I mean, what was the main, not the only, but what was the main motivation for the US to create and spread its hegemony around the world after 1945?
Why?
After World War II, what was the United States most concerned about?
Economic.
No, I mean, the most
increase.
important concern for the US was the Soviet Union. That President Truman—
Cold War?
Yeah, Cold War, right? That the United States leadership, not everybody, but the dominant view became that, oh my God, the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin is trying to do what Adolf Hitler tried to do. That the Soviet Union is like Nazi Germany, except it's a Russian version of Nazi Germany. And it's a country that has it's an imperialist, aggressive country that has a much more appealing ideology. This ideology is communism. Hitler was talking about white supremacy and leading the white people to global rule over the lesser races, including the Slavs, and not to mention everyone else, but over the Eastern European peoples. I mean, that's not going to be very appealing to many people. But Soviet Union is talking about communism, and for a lot of people, including Koreans and Vietnamese and other people in other parts of the world, their experience with capitalism from France, or capitalism from Japan, or capitalism from Britain, was not very nice, right? I mean, you know how the Japanese made profit. Japanese capitalists and companies still are being sued in Korean courts for exploiting Korean laborers, basically slave labor, so they can make more money, more profits for the company and for the Japanese society. And that was true in all of these empires. The experience with capitalism was not a very pleasant experience because it was connected to racism and imperialism. So Soviet Union is saying communism is the answer, communism, and it works. Look what we have done in the Soviet Union since the communist revolution at the end of World War I. We were destroyed. Russia was destroyed, defeated in World War I. Then the Civil War happened. It killed millions more people. The economy was destroyed. And then we rebuilt the economy under communism and became an industrialized state. And then we got invaded by the Germans under Hitler, and they devastated our country and killed tens of millions and millions of people. But then we defeated Germany. We occupied Germany we developed our economic resources and occupied with our military, with our resources, and used it to conquer Germany and then rebuild in 5 years. We rebuilt from the devastation of World War II. So by 1950, our economy was back up to where it was before the war. And then we went even further. We were the first country to put a satellite into space, and then the first country to put a man into space. And so you peoples of Africa and Asia coming out of imperialist domination, racist imperialist domination by European powers, capitalist powers, look to our model. Copy our model. Our model, communism, is the model, and of course the Soviet Union would always point to the racism of American society also as a weakness of the United States. That the United States doesn't like people that are of African background or other racial minorities. Look how they treat their Black people, and this covers also, you know, the American history paper, right? That and this competition with the Soviet Union was not the only one, but it was I would argue the primary driving force for American globalization after World War II, because the Americans were afraid that the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany. And so America needed to strengthen its friends and help its friends develop economically and become stable political countries, or else they might fall under communism. And also, you know, American economy was huge. I mean, it was at the end of World War II. I mean, almost half of what the world was producing economically was just the United States economy, producing almost half of the total world's output. So the Americans had a lot of money that they needed to invest to make more money, but they're in drive to do that. And, you know, and tax Americans to pay for these programs was because we needed to develop Japan and Western Europe to get them developed economically so they can resist communism. They can stand up to the Soviet Union and be allies with us against the Soviet Union. And we need to show that we're not racists. So we need to, you know, by the 1960s, you know, the Americans really start to move to try to improve the human rights conditions for Black people and Hispanic people, partly because Americans are competing with the Soviet Union for influence in Africa and Asia. And that meant that the Americans had to stop being so racist, at least so openly, blatantly racist, through their Jim Crow segregation laws, and also by changing their immigration laws. Because since the 1920s, the United States had really had implemented a really blatantly racist immigration policies. It used to be easy through the 19th century to come to the United States. From the beginning of the US until the end of the 19th century, it was pretty easy. You just got to get on a boat. You could go to the United States. And you got to the United States, you would be brought in. You didn't have to have a passport. There weren't passports in the 19th century. But then after World War I, there were some restrictions. There was anti-Asian restrictions placed by the late 19th century. So there, and again, not against Europeans, only against Chinese people and others. There were already racist immigration policies implemented. And then these became even more intense by the 1920s. In the 1920s, after World War I, the Americans started limiting immigration from from countries other than Germany and Western Europe. They started limiting immigration from Eastern European countries, Southern European countries, and that continued into the 1960s. And only in the 1960s did the Americans change their immigration laws to allow it to make it possible for people to come legally from Asia and Africa. And so today, Asian Americans are among the fastest growing minority, I think is the fastest growing minority group in the United States. But that's only since the 1960s that really has accelerated. And the Americans did it because they wanted to show and appeal to the rest of the world that America is not a racist country. America is a land of opportunity. The American system provides opportunities for everybody. We love everybody around the world, so don't listen to those communists. And so that's part of the reason why America became more diverse. Again, going back to this, why did America spread its hegemony? It wasn't just because it wanted hegemony. It wanted hegemony because it wanted to oppose the Soviet Union. I tried to show that video in class, right? That I didn't have the audio working from 1950, that propaganda video, the US Army from 1950 that was shown in all of the theaters in the United States, the spread of communism in Eastern Europe, into Asia, into China, North Korea. They tried to go into South Korea, into Tibet. And so, and then of course, the Cold War continued on, and then the Americans believe, rightly or wrongly, that they won the Cold War. And the people that run the United States, the leaders of the United States, they're all excited about what they think the Americans have achieved. The United States has achieved in defeating the Soviet Union. And George H.W. Bush, who was president when the Soviet Union collapsed, declared that the United States would build a new world order. That America would build a new world order now that the Soviet Union had collapsed. And of course, the United States should provide that leadership. And of course, the United States should do what's necessary to build this new world order that will end the danger of totalitarianism from any source. No more evil empires will emerge, like Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire in 1983. And of course, the Americans will provide leadership. And the first place where the Americans really blatantly showed that was when they went to war against Saddam Hussein in Iraq, because Saddam Hussein of Iraq wanted to unify all of the Arabs under his leadership, the way Kim Il-sung wanted to unify the Koreans under his dictatorship. Saddam Hussein wanted to unify all the Arabs under his leadership and overthrow these backward sheikdoms and kingdoms and corrupt leaders and rule under his dictatorship. He was going to be the Otto von Bismarck of the Arabs, the Kim Il-sung of the Arabs, to overcome these boundaries and borders that were drawn by the British and the French that divided up the Arab world in the early part of the 20th century. And the Americans went to war to stop Saddam Hussein from doing that. And the United States President George H.W. Bush, I remember this is 30 years ago, was on TV saying, we have to do this because Saddam Hussein's an evil dictator. He's evil, he's bad, he's dangerous. We have to stop him. We have to reverse this. And the Americans went to war. They killed God knows how many Iraqi people died in the bombing. And then that was in August 1990. I remember it was on my birthday when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in 1990, and the Americans started bombing Saddam Hussein's Iraq. And then in the spring of 1991, they went to war. They sent the US military and they drove the Iraqi army out of Kuwait. in 4 days, it was over. The US suffered less than 100 soldiers killed. And George W. Bush was incredibly popular. George H.W. Bush was incredibly popular. He had public opinion approval ratings over 90%. Over 90% of public opinion surveys said he was great. And this is in spring 1991. And then by November 1992, when the US presidential elections occur, he loses to Bill Clinton. So the Americans are already, they were willing to fight the Cold War to believe that the Soviet Union was a danger. But when the Soviet Union disappeared, they soon emerged within them a willingness to accept the president has a leadership role. But at the same time, during a crisis, but at the same time, they were more and more skeptical. The American public became, generally speaking, more and more skeptical about why are we still spending all this money on defense? Why do we have all these military bases all over the world? Why are we continuing to allow people to come into our country and look for jobs? Why are we making agreements to reduce our environmental pollution by cooperating with other countries around the world? Why are we allowing China to export so much of its products to the United States? China was useful when we were opposing the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union's gone. So why do we have to continue to let China, export everything it can manufacture to the United States just so American companies can make more and more money from their international economic investments, including in China? And this anger was growing. And then the September 11, 2001 attacks happened, 10 years after the first Gulf War. The September 11 attacks happened, and everybody's attention focused to supposed terrorism. And George W. Bush, the son of George H.W. Bush, is now president, and he declares we have to invade Afghanistan, and then we have to invade Iraq. And the war goes on and on and on and on in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he is replaced by a new guy who's talking in new ways, Barack Hussein Obama, a black man with a Muslim sounding name, wins the election for president. He's promising he's going to change things. We're going to change we're going to focus more on our internal problems, our economic problems, and so on. And he does, but not enough. And we know what happened. Hillary Clinton runs against Donald Trump in 2016, and she loses to Donald Trump, who's promising that I really am going to change America's activity in the whole world. And he's the one so the point I'm going to make here, because we have to go back, we have to talk about your history paper, is that although this does overlap with the history paper, right, that there was this long-term trends that were emerging way back in the when the Soviet Union collapsed, over 30 years, about this desire or pressure that was emerging among general American public to withdraw our commitments from reduce our commitments to the rest of the world, because the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union's gone. And it's hard to get really scared about Iran, right? Iran is a country of 80 million people, but the whole economy of Iran, for example, it's the size of half of the US Defense Department budget. You can't view Iran as terrible as the Soviet Union, even though George W. Bush called Iran part of the axis of evil, along with Saddam Hussein's Iraq and the Taliban's Afghanistan and Kim Jong-il's North Korea. It's hard to get afraid of these countries because they're so small. Even North Korea. I mean, what's North Korea going to do? If they dare do something bad in the United States, they'll be vaporized. They all know that, even though they have nuclear weapons, right? But the Islamic militants who attacked the United States on September 11, 2001, that was shocking and everything. But you know, that is a source of anger and discontent, because on the basis of responding to those attacks, the United States failed in Afghanistan after 20 years and all that money spent. And now is the United States going to fail in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East? And there's a lot of people that are still focused on the United States being very interested in the Middle East, like the Israel lobby is wants the Americans to stay involved in the Middle East because Israel can't do what it wants to do if it doesn't have American support. And America supported Israel during the Cold War because they thought that Israel was an ally against the friendly pro-Soviet governments in the Arab world. So the enemy of anybody who's our friend and against the friends of the Soviet Union is good. So Israel has to be supported. But now the Soviet Union is gone, and Israel lobby is still important. But you notice, I mean, I notice in news media reports on foreign affairs and international relations that the Chinese are very careful never to talk about Israel. China, Beijing, Xi Jinping is very careful never to talk about Israel. And I think they do that on purpose, because they know that if they are seen as an enemy of Israel, they're in big trouble, because the Americans will mobilize more easily against them. So they won't, even though China is all about anti-imperialism, China says that we stand for the non-white peoples of the world. We suffered from imperialism and occupation by foreigners. We understand what you're suffering, people in Africa and Asia. We're their answer to developing your country, not these Americans with their legacy of imperialism, but they never talk about Israel. And I think because they're afraid of, if they do, it will be too easy for China's adversaries in the United States to portray China as a threat to America and America's friends. But still, a lot of Americans are saying, why are we investing so much resources in international affairs when we have our problems here in the United States? And it's, and I'm not saying this is an easy problem to resolve, because at the same time, like we talked about in class, like Hans Morgenthau and realists have pointed out, people are inconsistent in how they think and how they feel all of the time, generally speaking. So even though the Americans might say, we want out of all of these commitments, they don't want to be humiliated. So they don't like leaving Afghanistan the way the Americans left Afghanistan, with appeared to be humiliating, in a humiliating, incompetent way. So even though one point they say we should really get out of all of these commitments that we've involved ourselves in, but at the same time they don't like looking like they lost or they failed. So Joe Biden has got a very difficult task to fulfill, because even if he is willing to reduce American commitments abroad, he doesn't at the same time want to risk his adversaries in the United States portraying him as an incompetent leader who lets America be humiliated and lets America fail. So like we just mentioned, right? I just heard again today, the Biden administration is not cutting the military budget. The Biden administration, in fact, even the Democratic controlled Congress in the United States is putting more money into the US military. Are you still there? Hello? Hello? Lost you there for a bit, huh?
Sorry, Professor, my Wi-Fi connection was wrong.
Okay, so let's talk about your history paper.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's go to your history paper, and let me open up that history paper. And okay, so we go here, and let me go to share screen for that. And share screen, and I think here it is. Okay, so here is that's the U.S. foreign policy. I'll just close that, save that. and we talk about the history paper now. So here you can see the history paper. So again, I already told you what I'm doing in the suggestions for improving your English. So I won't have to go through that again. So in which or through which, just in terms of avoiding ending a sentence with a preposition. So the main issue is that a lot of the paper is copied from the Flynn essay, and so you need to rephrase the Flynn information in your own words if you're going to use it. Okay, and I think I sent you that copy killer report. I think I can show it to you again here. That I think I sent that to you. So let me find it here. Where do I have it here? I have it. I opened it. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we go back to that. We go share screen, and we go to yeah, there it is. So there you see the correspondence. I sent you this. So as an attachment, so you can see any place where you copy text, you need to put in quotation marks, and you give the source. Otherwise, you're claiming that you're claiming grade credit for having written the text, but you didn't write the text, you copied it. So you need to, and remember, if you put in quotation marks, no more than 10% of the paper should be quoted text. So let me go back to that, and so let's work with that. What do you write here? Yeah, I mean, this is something that is talked about later in the Zen book, after chapters 1 through 12. It's towards the end of the book, and Flynn, I guess Flynn is just pointing out that Zen makes these statements that are not only theoretically questionable, they're just wrong, factually wrong, right? Because Flynn points out that the crime rate was dropping in the United States when he was writing his essay. So Flynn published his essay in 2003. So that's 18 years ago. Zen's been dead since 2010. But Flynn is writing his article in 2003. And that's 2 years after the September 11, 2001 attacks. So soon after those attacks in the United States. And Flynn argues that Zen uses a Marxist uses a Marxist framework, right? I think Zen at the beginning of his book argues or states, I think in the introduction, that everybody uses a framework. Everybody understands and perceives the world by using a mental theoretical framework they have in their head. They might not be aware of what it is, but it's there. So if that's true, if Zen uses a Marxist framework, what kind of theoretical lens, like the lens of the glasses, what kind of theoretical framework lens label would you give to Daniel Flynn? What's the name of, how would you describe the theoretical framework that Daniel Flynn uses to study American history? And I think we talked about it briefly in class, right? He uses what's called, I think, a positive American exceptionalism. Flynn is furious with Zen. He's really, really angry with Zen. Why is he so angry with Zen? Yeah, and I think the reason why Flynn is so angry with Zen is because if you read Zen's book, you read Zen's textbook, what's the image you get of the United States? That it's all about a history of oppression, imperialism, exploitation, suffering. That but at the same time, you remember Flynn's writing his essay 2 years after the September 11, 2001 attacks. The U.S. is going to war against Afghanistan earlier. They invaded Afghanistan at the end of 2001. And in March 2003, they invade Iraq. And so it's a time of intense concern and mobilization of the United States. And, there's a lot of people saying, You know why those attacks in the United States happened on September 11, 2001? Because America didn't provide enough leadership to create a better world after the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Because America thought its job is done. Okay, we defeated the Russian version of Nazi Germany. We wash our hands, we're done, woo! Instead, because America did not provide global leadership, the evilness that began during the Cold War, including so-called terrorism, modern terrorism, so-called, was allowed to spread and develop like cancer. Like if somebody gets cancer, if you get a cancer, if you don't take out that tumor, you have to take out that tumor. But if that tumor sends out cells throughout the rest of the body, it's called metastasize. So America defeated the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a sick tumor in the world, but there were cancer cells that left from that sick Soviet Cold War tumor that spread to the Middle East, spread to Korea and North Korea. And the Americans have not cleaned up all of the illness, the disease that the Soviet Union and the Cold War created. Instead of thought, oh, Soviet Union's gone, we're done. And of course, eventually the evilness that emerged because of the Cold War, during the Cold War, was allowed to grow and develop further. And guess what happened? They attacked the United States because they wanted to, those people that attacked the United States, they hate what the United States stands for, and they hate that the United States is so influential and so important in the world. And so Flynn makes certain assumptions, right? Like the dominant view still to this present in the United States and maybe in much of the world today, that the United States won the Cold War, that the United States defeated the Russian version of Nazi Germany, and the United States defeated the Soviet Union that was trying to conquer the world. And so the United States saved you, it saved me, it saved the whole world from evil, totalitarianism. And why did the United States win that Cold War? Why did it win? Did it win because it's got lots of money, it's got big, strong military? Well, to some extent, yes, but that's not enough. The United States is admired by many people around the world. That's why America is so influential. That's why the United States won the Cold War. It wasn't just because of the American military, and it wasn't because of American money. It was because of American values that you and many other people, maybe you, I don't know for certain, admire the United States. The United States is admired. And so, and that's why America won the Cold War. And that's why America's influential. And that's why the world looks to the United States to provide leadership. But if you read the Zen book, who can admire the United States if you read the Zen book? The picture of the United States as Zen portrays, it's a country that's founded upon racism, exploitation, abuse of minorities, evil, powerful, evil, rich capitalist white men exploiting everybody else. And who's going to fight for that? I mean, if America's so evil, why did it win the Cold War? Why is it admired? And more importantly, look, Howard Zinn wrote his book. And Daniel Flynn doesn't like his book. So what? Flynn tells you at the beginning what he's really upset about. He's upset about the fact that there are thousands of teachers and college instructors like me making students like you read that book. Out of all of the books on American history that are available, people like me are making you read, choosing to read that book. What's our problem? Flynn might say, what's the problem of academics and universities? that they are brainwashing their students to be ashamed of their country, to be ashamed of themselves, particularly if they're white people, white Europeans. When clearly the United States is truly positively exceptional. That's the framework of Daniel Flynn, positive American exceptionalism, that America is so influential around the whole world, not because of its military, not because of its money, but because it's admired. And you know why it's admired? Because it is positively exceptional. It is a beacon of freedom, and well-being. And why is it a beacon of freedom and well-being? Because of its values, its traditional values that made the United States the democracy and economic powerhouse that it is. And those values are what we call the American creed, right? The American ideology of free market capitalism, small government, elections, electing the people, the decision makers to make the policies, not bureaucrats, not civil servants, not college professors, the elected leaders, including people like Donald Trump, that truly represent these traditional American values of capitalism and traditional values like religion and traditional notions of family. You know, that what is a family? It's a man and a woman who get married and have children and stay married. It's not, men marrying men and women marrying women. So, and this is why, for example, well, look at Korea. Look how influential America is here. Is America so influential here just because it dropped lots of bombs during the Korean War? No. And what was it? 25% of the population is Christian in Korea. Again, something that was heavily influenced by the United States. This university, it's an American style model university. This class, why isn't this class in Japanese? This class is in English. You and me, in this class, it's in English. Why? Why is it not in Japanese or Chinese or Russian? Because America is truly positively exceptional and therefore admired by many, many people around the whole planet, around the whole world. And Zinn doesn't talk about that. He doesn't talk about the great achievements of the United States that make it admired. Instead, we're teaching our kids through Zinn that Americans should be ashamed when America is called upon to save the world. It was called upon to save the world during the Cold War, and now it's being called upon to save the world from the threat of Islamic militancy. And again, Flynn published his article in 2003. So now it's 2021. He would say, now we got the People's Republic of China, the Communist Party of China is a threat to the world. Because it's the nature of communist states that they must expand, that big, powerful communist states must expand if they are going to survive. And that means expand their model, their system of government, their totalitarianism, their brutality. And we have to be mobilized. We have to mobilize the American people to defend our freedoms. You have to defend, you have to fight for your freedom. If you don't fight for your freedom, you'll lose it. But who wants to fight and defend America if after reading the Zinn book? And I think, this is, and I come back to what we were talking about in your foreign policy paper. This international environment, this international situation is critically important for understanding Daniel Flynn's essay. And America won the Cold War, and it won the Cold War because it's admired. It made mistakes. America makes mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And the biggest mistake maybe was the Vietnam War. And let's keep that, remember, it wasn't under the Republicans of Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan that mistake happened. That was made by a Democrat, Lyndon Johnson. when he became president after Kennedy was murdered. And then he got elected in 1964. He is the one that sent in the US military in a large scale into Vietnam. And it was Nixon, a Republican, who got us out of Vietnam, although not as nicely as we would have liked, not in a way that would have kept our self-respect as we would have liked. But Nixon didn't pay a price for that because he had already resigned after he got reelected in 1972. So Nixon said, I've got a secret plan to get us out of Vietnam when he was running for president. I will, and then so he becomes president, and then he goes to China with Kissinger and reestablishes diplomatic relations with China. And China moves over to basically becoming an ally of the United States against the Soviet Union. Because the Americans Kissinger and Nixon could see the Soviet Union was really in conflict with China. They were even killing each other in border war in Siberia along the Amur River. And by reestablishing diplomatic relations with communist China, Nixon was then able to use that leverage of influencing China to make problems for the Soviet Union, so that the Soviet Union would then pressure North Vietnam to make agreement with America, so America could leave Vietnam without looking like it lost. So that works. The Americans make an agreement to leave Vietnam, and the last American soldiers leave Vietnam in 1973. And then Nixon resigns in 1974 because he acted in criminal ways against his political opponents who were protesting against the war and undermining America's will and burning American flags and calling American troops baby killers. And these were university-led protests. That's what Flynn is highlighting, I think, that it was the universities and college professors and college students who were at the cutting edge or were important, very important high-profile actors in the protests against the Vietnam War and against and condemning American influence around the world. And there were people like Howard Zinn, who and others like William Appleman Williams, Gar Alpovitz. Howard Zinn mentions Gar Alpovitz, Gabriel Coco. These are all called the New Left historians, representing New Left social movements, the New Left historians, who they want to try to explain how did America get involved in this disaster, this tragedy called Vietnam, where millions of people would die if you include Cambodia and the Khmer Rouge who came to power during the Vietnam War, partly because of American intervention there that intensified hatreds in Cambodia. And people like Howard Zinn are saying, well, this was a mistake. How do we make this horrible mistake? And why, if we made this mistake, is this the only time we made this mistake? What about other places? What about in Latin America? What about in American sending the military throughout the 19th century to occupy Haiti, for example? Haiti was occupied until the 1930s by the American Marines. What about what about these people like Howard Zinn start looking at all of American history to re-examine the assumptions that prevailed and dominated in positive American exceptionalism to try to explain why America was acting the way it was acting in Vietnam and why it was the bad guy. And if it was the bad guy in Vietnam, then maybe it was the bad guy in a lot of other ways that people just never really didn't want to see because because they're white, powerful, rich people, or at least white people. And they have been controlling us, and they've been brainwashing us to support, because Nixon was still very popular, and he won in a landslide in 1972. And but it was college students and college professors that were playing a critical role in this protest against the Vietnam War. From Flynn's point of view, the Vietnam War was a tragedy, but it was a tragedy due to incompetence. And America wasn't the bad guy. America was led by rather incompetent political leaders like Lyndon Johnson and then Jimmy Carter, who got elected in 1976. And when Jimmy Carter was president, communism in the world expanded further. Communists came to power in Angola, in Mozambique, the former colonies of Portugal. There was a communist revolution in Nicaragua under the Sandinistas. There was a communist revolution in Grenada, a little island country off the coast of Caribbean. The communists came to power in Ethiopia and also in Somalia. And this was all happening when Jimmy Carter is saying, oh, the Cold War was a mistake. We shouldn't be focusing so much on containment in the Cold War. I'm going to focus on human rights. And of course, what happened from the point of view of people like Daniel Flynn, the Soviet Union saw that Jimmy Carter was a soft head and took advantage of his naivete, his softness to expand their empire. And then, of course, the CIA's ally agent, the Shah of Iran, was overthrown in 1978-79, and a lot of people were convinced that the Soviet Union played some role in that. And then the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in December 1979, and a lot of people were concerned that the Soviet Union was doing that to prepare to attack the Middle East and take the oil there away from everyone else. And so Ronald Reagan gets elected, and for people like Daniel Flynn, Ronald Reagan is one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States, and it's even referenced in that essay, right? He says, why doesn't Zinn talk about Reagan's speech at the Brandenburg Gate? He's talking about this speech where Ronald Reagan is elected, and in his second term, he gives a speech in Berlin, in divided Berlin, before the Brandenburg Gate, in which he calls upon Gorbachev, who come to power, to tear down this wall at the Brandenburg Gate, right? And Zinn puts that speech together with the Gettysburg Address of Lincoln and George Washington's farewell address as the first president, as one of the critical speeches in the history of the United States by its presidents. And this person gets credit from people like Flynn for winning the Cold War, supposedly winning the Cold War in spite of Howard Zinn and in spite of Howard Zinn's followers. In spite of them, he was able to push the Soviet Union to reform because they couldn't compete with him under his strong leadership and increasing America's military. And Gorbachev comes to power in 1985, and Reagan gives a speech 2 years later and says, tear down this Berlin Wall. And then 2 years later, the Berlin Wall's down. And then 4 years later, the Soviet Union's gone. Just 4 years after this speech, in spite of Howard Zinn and his followers. So that's the context for trying to understand the difference. That Flynn believes that America's victory in the Cold War clearly shows that America is positively exceptional, despite what Howard Zinn and this anti-American Marxist historian and his followers want you to believe, and despite people like me making you read Howard Zinn. So do you have any other questions?
No, it's fine.
Okay, so I remember, use the index in the books, and I will save this and send this to you, and then I will send you the recording to this video Zoom meeting later this afternoon. Okay, I'll send you the YouTube link to it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.